All right, welcome to this episode of Photo Theology. I'm your host, Doug, and today we're going to be looking at the Canon T4i, which I got the name right in this episode, versus the Pentax K30. Now, this is actually an episode that is being done for my friend and fan, Jacob. Uh, he wanted me to say his last name, but I'm not going to say his last name. So he'll be able to laugh at that when he sees this video. But basically, it centers around these two cameras for the simple reason that he was having a discussion with somebody, and in the end, the discussion fell down to the person saying that the Canon T4i took a better picture in an ISO test and resolution matchup than the Pentax K30. So, in this episode, what we have going on here is we have the Pentax with an interpolation, okay, because it's 16 megapixels, but it is interpolated to 18 megapixels, going up against the Canon T4i. Now, here's part of the problem that you've got here in this, okay, is that a lot of people don't understand the Canon T4i. A lot of people believe the camera is better than what it is. And to give you an idea of how this breaks down, okay, the Canon T4i is 18 megapixels. Its autofocusing is at about a 0.28-ish, 0.25-ish, and that's with, I want to say, a high-grade, low light lens put to it that runs around about 1,000 or so. You're also talking about 5 frames a second in a 25,000 ISO, okay? And it's actually 25,600 ISO. But anyways, I like to say 25,000 ISO. Okay, so that's what you're looking at in the Canon. The Canon's also has the ability to produce, video and what have you not. That there doesn't change, like most SLRs can at this point in time now. And it actually has a mic in. Now, if you're talking about the, price range of the Canon, you're normally talking around about, we'll say, 1,000 to 1,200-ish if you're talking about having the 18 to 135 kit lens. Okay, I'm not even going to entertain the concept of the 18 to 55. But if I did, the Pentax would whoop the Canon's ass. Okay, that's easy enough to be said there. Okay, now let's back over to the Pentax K30. Pentax K30 is going to have an autofocusing of about a 0.16. That's the first thing. The second thing is the Pentax K30 is going to have the same light range. You're talking about a 25, 16, or 600, 25,600 in terms of the light range. The third thing is you were talking about 6 frames a second versus 5 frames a second, meaning the Pentax is 1 frame faster than what the Canon is. Okay, so you have some differences there. The Pentax is going to have an all-weather resistant body, and if you buy it with the 18 to 55 millimeter lens, then it will be a weather resistant lens that you can get with it as well. Now the Pentax has just had a price drop. The reason why this is relevant is because where the Canon for $1,200 will give you, roughly around 1,200. You're talking 18 to 135. With the Pentax, you can actually get a 17 to 70 millimeter SMC f4 lens, and hands down, that lens crushes the 18 to 135. Okay, there's no comparison here. Okay, so if you're talking about lens assortment wise, being able to purchase at a $1,200 price point, either the Canon or the Pentax, it clearly goes to the Pentax. Now, the Pentax is an all-weather resistant body. You can dump a bucket of water on the thing, it's going to survive. It's based off of the concept of my K20D, which I will be the first one to say is phenomenal, okay, when it comes to actual, body sealing and so on and so forth for dust and, getting wet and all that fun stuff, okay? So it definitely holds true to what it's supposed to be. Now, in terms of image quality, okay, now we're getting into, I want to say, like the 3200 ISO here, and you're now going to see a difference. I did start off with a 100 ISO just to show both cameras at their premium quality. Here what you have is you have a 3200. And already you can actually see a difference between the Pentax and the Canon. The Canon is definitely more noisier. Even at 100 ISO, the Canon's not as sharp. Now, when you're talking about both of these cameras, it is important to note that the K30 is the second tier of Pentax, okay? It's not the primary tier, but it's a sub-primary tier. The Rebel series is the entry-level tier for Canon. And this is one of the mistakes that a lot of people make, because a lot of people tend to sit up here and look at Canon and they think of like a 5D, whatever version of it they want to think of. And then what they want to do is turn around and say, oh, well, I'm going to go buy this Rebel, and this Rebel's the same thing as the 5D. And sad to say, but it's not. By no stretch of the imagination, with its Digix processor, can the Canon T4i even begin to match the Canon 5D Mark III. It just can't do it. And by no stretch of the imagination am I trying to compare the Pentax K30 to the Pentax K5 II or 2S. I'm not trying to do that. So you have two sub-tier cameras that you're making a comparison in this setup here that we've got going on. But the key thing to look at is how much more mileage you get in comparison with the Pentax versus the Canon. That's what you've got to look at. You got to look at the noise control. You got to look at the dynamic range. You do have to look at the coloring as well. Now, by no means is this like, a Nikon D800E versus a Pentax, K5 II. I mean, the coloring is not that drastically different, although I want to say the sharpness on the Canon is a lackluster. One of the reasons, though, why the Canon actually takes a hit in this is because the Canon Digix processor basically does a better job if you're talking about 14 megapixels or below. If you go through the Canon lineup, if you actually look at sharpness, you will notice that they typically maximize at 14 megapixels, but once when they go over that, they got to do something, okay? So whether it's dual imaging processing that they've got to do or whatever, that's what has to happen, okay, in order to get the job done. Here, though, with the T4i, you only have a single imaging processor, and you have 18 megapixels. Now, the question would be, all right, well, why is it, Canon throws in 18 megapixels if they know after 14 they need to use a dual imaging processor setup in order to maximize the megapixels that they have? Well, the answer to that is simple. It's quality and control. That's what it comes down to. So when you're buying a Rebel, and this is a lesson for you guys all to learn now, when you guys are buying a Rebel thinking that it's the hottest thing, in an entry-level SLR category, which this here clearly proves that it's not. But let's just pretend it is for a moment in time, okay? When you're buying a Rebel, and when you're buying it at that whopping 18 megapixels with that single imaging processor, what that realistically is to Canon is basically them setting in a quality control, which you will undoubtedly figure out by the end of your adventure with that Rebel, that if you want to get anywhere in terms of image quality and performance, you are going to have to upgrade your camera. Now, this started with the T1i. This started with the T1i. If you go back and look at the Rebels since the T1i, okay, that are all 15 megapixels or above, you will notice that they all have serious issues if you're talking about chromatic aberration, if you're talking about sharpness, if you're talking about, I want to say, multi-exposure capability, so on and so forth. I could go on and on and on, okay, about that. All right, and keep in mind, that's not with a fine, high-end lens like the Sigma, 70mm 2.8 that's being used here to test these models. Okay, you got to keep that in mind too. All right. So when I said all those things, I'm talking about real people using real lenses in an everyday situation. Now, why this is relevant is because as you get up into these higher ISOs, you will notice the Canon image just really doesn't hold it together that well. And quite honestly, part of it comes down to this in terms of the thinking, all right, from Canon's end and from, the natural world of photography. There comes a point where an ISO is no longer usable, okay? And for these cameras, you could arguably say after 64, it's definitely not usable. There comes a point where you can actually make that statement. But the reality is this: if you are one of these people running out, spending only $1,200 on an SLR, or we'll say $600 to $1,200 on an SLR, chances are your lens assortment deals with f-stops that are not favorable to low lit situations. Okay, there's a pretty good chance that that's the case. And in understanding that, that's where the higher ISOs come from. So naturally, if I'm shooting with an f1.4, okay, I'm going to be able to shoot at an 800 to 1600 ISO versus if I have a lens that is shooting with an f3.5 to a 5.6, where undoubtedly, if I'm shooting at a 55 millimeter, it's a 5.6, my ISO is going to jump up to 6,400, 12,000, 25,000. Easily, I'm going there. Easily, it's not even debatable. It's gonna happen. Okay, and if you're trying to shoot inside your home, and you've only got 3 lights on in the room, and it's now or night outside, and you're trying to get rid of your blur, you normally got to be around about like a 2.8, and that there's at a 6400 ISO to get like 1/40th of a second or so. Okay, so when we look at these higher ISO tests, understand that there is a level of relevancy in them. I know a lot of times you guys look at this and you might be thinking, why on earth is he up here trying to throw in some like 25,000 ISO when it's clearly not working in either camera's favor, or whatever the case may be. That's because sometimes you got to hit those ranges to get what you want to have done. Not everyone's going to sit up here and pop on a flash, because sometimes that defeats the purpose of it. On top of that, if you're a black and white shooter, then you really don't worry about higher ISOs anyways in terms of their graininess, because you can play that in favor of what you're trying to do. Or if you're into film simulation, you can still do that as well. But going back to, specifically here, the Pentax and the Canon, it's just a simple case where the Pentax wins out. I will say this: the Canon has the mic input, which the Pentax doesn't have a mic input, and that's one of the weaknesses of the Pentax when it comes, down to a video. However, I must stress this about video: real people who do real video always break up your video channel and your sound channel. That is a reality. That's how it's done, and that's the way it's always going to be done, more than likely. Also, your video quality is a reflection of your picture taking capability. I had stated this in the Nikon D800E review that I did. And here I'm going to say the same thing too. If you can't produce a solid image at a given light range, then your video is going to look just as bad when it's all said and done. I can't tell you how many people I've seen that, get a Canon Rebel thinking, oh man, I'm going to go shoot a music video now. Oh yeah, this is going to be awesome. And then lo and behold, they find out, man, this thing sucks indoors. Well, the reason why it sucks indoors are a couple things. Part of it's the lens you're using. Trying to shoot with a 3.5 to a 5.6 in, normal, in-home lighting situations really doesn't play out well, because you're automatically, artificially boosting yourself to a 6400 to a 12,000 anyways. But on that, you could talk about, I want to say, the multi-exposure, lack thereof, that the T4i has, or the Rebel series has at this point in general. And I could go on and on about a bunch of other things too, in comparison to the Pentax. But you know, the results are what they are here. And the reason why I interpolated for this episode was for one simple reason that I want to point out to you guys, which is I don't want people to think that the 16 megapixels is a drawback. We have now proven that just because you have the higher megapixel, it doesn't mean you have the better picture. Especially when you get down to these greater ISOs. I mean, you can notice. You take a look at the green leaves, you know, in the setting there. You can't even make it out on the Canon side anymore what the heck it is. In the Pentax, you can still tell what it is. I mean, between the two of them, I would roughly say the Pentax is roughly about four times better on its ISO. Well, we'll say 4 to 8 times better on its ISO performance if I had to make this, you know, make this comparison between them. But you know that there's the the price of victory. Now, for those of you who went out and bought a Canon T4i, just like those people that bought that Nikon D800E, all I'm going to tell you is go and get your money back if you're within the return policy. That's it. There's not much for me to say beyond that. But beyond that, you guys can stay tuned. Take care. Bye-bye.